Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a graphic nature and in graphic detail and may not be suitable for children under 13. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to day 5 of our 7 Deadly Sins countdown to Halloween. I am Janice Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And here we go. Tonight's episode is about the deadly sin of greed. And Jameson here is going to be presenting. So take it away, Jameson.
All right. Tonight we are going to cover what is considered America's first serial killer. This is the case of H. Holmes.
He's got a million board games out there. He's like a ghost, sort of. He's like a legend.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he definitely has a reputation for himself. And throughout this presentation, we'll see if he lives up to that. So Herman Webster Mudgett was born on May 16th, 1861 to Levi Horton Mudgett and Theodate Page Price
I'm
in
just gonna
New
say,
Hampshire.
if my last name was Mudgett, I would change it too.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Levi and Theodate were descendants of the first English settlers in that area. So, I
Wow.
mean, that kind of makes sense. So the names are definitely of a different time. So Herman was the third born child. Herman's parents were Methodists. So definitely what do we want to say? Religion.
I was gonna say
I,
the
I,
religious, yeah,
I was gonna say religious, but also like lifestyle and morals, and I'm
devout.
sure were part of the upbringing and things like that. So Herman attended the Exeter Academy and graduated with honors at 16 years old. So he was a smart kid.
Wow.
Yeah, I was very impressed with that. I was like, okay, that's definitely way more than I could ever do. I was not very good in school. I don't know about you.
Um, I had the capacity, I just didn't have the attention span.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah. At least not in high school. In college, I did very well, but high school, nope. I just didn't have it in me. Way too busy chasing the girls and getting into trouble.
There you go. Herman's father was a heavy drinker who mistreated the entire family. So he was one of those, he hates his life when he's gonna fix it with alcohol kind of thing.
We hear that a
So
lot, don't we?
yeah, we do, unfortunately, and it's just an awful trend, and I'm sure had some kind of something to do with what he became. So
Yeah, I have no doubt.
so going based on, when he graduated and how young he was, it's no surprise that Herman was bullied by his classmates for how smart he was. Big nerd, and everybody went after him, and he was a target.
Yeah, I can see that. He would have been someone I would have picked on, especially with a name like Mudgett.
Yeah, no kidding. One of the bullying things that happened to him was he was forced to stand in front of a human skeleton. He had the human skeleton hands put on his face. Just imagine having like one of the skeletons that you see in like a classroom or something like that, but it was an actual human skeleton.
Is it wrong that that wouldn't have bothered me? I'm
I'm
like,
not
oh
sure.
shit. I'm like, okay.
So apparently, you would fit in quite well with him
I
because
guess so.
um while he was first scared, Herman later said that the experience calmed him and he found it quite intriguing. So that kind of tells you a little bit about how he was as a person.
Yeah, that's all right. I wouldn't have calmed me, but it wouldn't have upset me. So there's a difference. Whew.
Herman developed an obsession with death because of this experience,
Naturally.
and he later got into dissecting animals. So we're
Hopefully they
hitting
were
one of the check
dead.
marks there. I
Well, it's not a check mark if they were already dead. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense, but there was no
They didn't
clear
indicate it.
description on whether or not
Right.
they were. So,
And
depending on
and
his
by
level of obsession.
right. And by the way, I found out what that's referred to.
Oh,
It's the McDonald triad or the
okay.
McDonald's triad, based on the name of the scientist or the whatever psychologist who developed it, being named McDonald. And that's
Oh,
the 3 points
okay.
that we always refer to is the McDonald triad. So
Very nice. That's
little
very good
educational point
information
for
to
everyone.
know. All right. Very nice. On July 4th, 1878, Herman married Clara Loverling, who had a little bit of money. He was hoping that she would kind of fund him in his education and things like that and kind of live off of her money.
I can see
Um,
that. Setting up the greed part of the show.
yeah, exactly. They did have one son together. Son's name was Robert. To continue his education, Herman had gone to the University of Vermont, but it wasn't for him. He wasn't happy there, and he ended up leaving after a year. He just he did try college once again in 1882 and went to the University of Michigan, and he studied in the Department of Medicine and Surgery, and he graduated in 1884.
Okay.
I mean, he's definitely on the other side of the death obsession, but you can learn a whole bunch of stuff as far as
Oh yeah, being a
get,
surgeon and dissecting animals, we can see where this is going.
while enrolled at college, Herman worked in the anatomy lab, and one of his professors, William James Herdman, was said to engaged in facilitating grave robbing.
Okay. Well, they probably need
So,
body parts for their school or something. Yeah.
and actually, that's exactly what it was. He had done the grave robbing to supply medical cadavers for the school.
Yeah. I can see at that time period, there probably weren't people donating their bodies to science the way we do today.
I mean, you kind of get it any way you can, I guess.
That sounded wrong.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know. I know.
Okay, Moskvin. That's gross.
Just a little bit. So Herman had apprenticed in New Hampshire under a gentleman named Nathan Wright, and he was a noted advocate of human dissections. So
Okay.
we're evolving the obsession, figuring out how to dissect humans. So we're upgrading from animals here.
Right.
And that I don't know, that kind of scared me that there was somebody else out there that enjoyed doing that.
I take it as, it's a sign of the times, like it's a time where you can't really procure bodies normally, or at least not that many. But the idea of being like you're excited about being a surgeon and you want to practice and you want to do all this stuff, I'm not surprised that there was an underground kind of market for that. I hate to say it. This doesn't shock me,
Okay, all right, fair enough.
but maybe I
So
watched
years
too many period piece movies like Frankenstein and stuff. I don't know.
who knows. So years later, when Herman was suspected of murder and claimed to be nothing but an insurance fraudster, he admitted to using cadavers to defraud life insurance companies multiple times in college.
That's fantastic.
Isn't that insane?
That's creative. That's like building a fake house, putting an insurance on it, burning it down, and collecting the money. Like that's brilliant in so many ways. I mean,
Yeah,
as long as he wasn't murdering the person, it's kind of funny.
yeah, I can see it. Yep.
And we all know he's gonna change. Like I'm not
Oh
naive
yeah,
about that.
clearly. Herman moved to Moores Fork, New York, and when he did move there, he was suspected of being around a little boy that had been reported missing.
Oh wow.
Uh, Herman had claimed that the boy went back home to Massachusetts, where he lived, and there was no investigation into that at all. And Herman quickly left town. He was like, "I'm out of here."
Okay. I can see
Yeah.
that.
Herman later trained in Philadelphia to get a job as a keeper at a hospital, but after a couple days, he quit. But he then did take a job at a drugstore, and while he was working there, a boy died after purchasing some medicine that he had gotten at the store.
Oh wow.
Herman didn't Herman denied anything being involved, but immediately left the city after.
Yeah, I mean, whether he's involved or not, I think I would have taken off too. You don't want that kind of heat coming down on you, especially where you're pulling scams like that.
Right, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
he feels the pressure on one direction or another. So, right before moving to Chicago, Herman changed his name to Henry Howard Holmes to avoid being exposed by the victims of the previous scams he had been running.
I've never understood why you would choose a name with alliteration like that.
I
You know,
have
H H
no,
H.
yeah, you would think it would make you stand out even more.
Yeah. And did you ever see that movie with Christian Slater where he had a pirate radio station in his house?
I think so, yeah.
He called himself Happy Harry Hardon. That's what it makes me
Yes,
think of.
yes, yes, yes.
Anyway, I digress.
So in 1886, Holmes married a 24-year-old named Murda Belknap in Minnesota. And this was still while he was married to his first wife, Clara.
I was about to ask that. Did he at least divorce her first? But of course not. He's a fraudster.
So he had filed for divorce. He had claimed infidelity on her part. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, I know. He was just kind of throwing things at a dartboard and was just like, okay, infidelity, get me out of this. But
He's
unfortunately, it was never filed properly, so the divorce was never finalized.
all right. I'm picturing Holmes with the jump to conclusions mat from Office Space.
Yes. So Holmes and Murda had one daughter. Her name was Lucy Theodette Holmes. Holmes, in his wonderful ways, marries yet again. Okay.
Three
This time,
wives.
this time to Georgina Yoke on January 17th, 1894, while still married to both Clara and Myrta.
Wow, he's got a harem going on. Sorta.
Seriously.
What is he, a Mormon?
Well, I mean, unless he changed his faith, he's Methodist, so I mean, going against
Eh,
everything here.
I mean, when you think that highly of yourself, maybe it doesn't matter.
Apparently not. Holmes ended up using that name that he had switched to when he arrived in Chicago in 1896.
Okay,
So
cool.
that is when he officially started using that.
Makes sense. Yeah, your new place. No one's gonna recognize you. New name. Perfect.
He ends up working at a drugstore in Inglewood, which is where so he was given the job at the drugstore and he was a hardworking employee and he ends up buying the drugstore
Oh wow.
from the woman that owns it.
Wacky.
Um yeah. So when he buys it, he also buys the lot across the street from the drugstore, and he ends up building or plans to build things in that empty lot. He has a whole grand plan on what he wants to do. So he wants the drugstore on the bottom floor. He wants apartments, and then he wants retail spaces. So he wants it to be a three-story thing. So, I mean, he had high hopes and he had high aspirations, but a lot of things happened here.
Okay.
One of which was he refused to pay the company that was building the building for him.
Hmm.
And because of that, the company ended up suing him in 1888,
Okay.
which makes sense. I mean, I'm not going to go and build you this, grand thing and then not have you pay me.
Yeah, but he sounds like he's quite the scammer. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, no, I mean, he definitely tried to weasel his way out of anything he possibly could. He had the first two floors for the building, and in 1892, he added a third floor, telling investors and suppliers that he intended to use it as a hotel during the upcoming Columbian Exposition, even though that the hotel portion was not completed. He was still going to try to rent it out and use it as a hotel for that
Okay.
big event. So,
But you're gonna tell people whatever you can to get money out of them. So that makes sense.
exactly. The hotel was somewhat completed, and it came with a completed basement as well. According to accounts, he would use the hotel to lure people in, but they would be tourists, and he would lure them in order to kill them.
And take their money, I'm assuming.
Yes, yep. So he was after their valuables, and he definitely wanted anything he could grab of value. Unfortunately, there was no evidence that Holmes tried to lure people into his hotel to kill them. It just, he ran it as a normal hotel, and it just looked normal from the outside.
Okay. It's the 1800s. I guess people weren't as easy to track back then. It just seems weird to me.
Yeah, no, a lot of things didn't make sense. A lot of things didn't add up when I was going through this. But once again, like you said, it was a different time, and they could definitely get away with a lot more.
Yeah, because if your only means of communication is writing, you're not hearing from people for weeks.
Exactly. Yep. So the people that he did kill, he would sell those cadavers to medical schools.
Yeah,
Talk
makes
talk about a
sense.
way to make a dollar.
No, it makes sense though.
So he would get his wares through grave robbing instead of murder.
His
Uh,
wares, like his equipment.
yes. So he would rob the graves and then get whatever he could from that instead of murdering.
All right, that makes sense.
Reports by the Yellow Press labeled the hotel the Murder Castle, claiming, yeah, I know, I laughed when I read that too. It claimed that the hotel had trap doors and gas chambers and all these kinds of torture racks and all this kinds of stuff. It was all exaggerated. None of it was true. Other accounts said that the hotel was made up of 100 rooms with no windows, doors that just led to brick walls, dead end staircases, things like that. So there was a lot of, speculation on what happened in this hotel and what was going on in the building, and it was all glorified.
Yeah, as I said earlier, there are board games based around this guy. He's like that much of a legend. You move around the board and like you find, you have to be careful not to trigger trap doors and you have to worry about him showing up behind you apparently in this game. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, it sounds
Uh,
quite
I
interesting.
say that, but I've never played it. I've only watched like how it works.
Okay, fair enough. So the hotel was gutted by a fire shortly after Holmes was arrested and used as a post office until 1938.
Oh, wow. That's cool. I mean, I like the idea of using historic places like that. You got to wonder if there were hauntings or something.
Oh, I'm sure there's got to be something. Now, in addition to his infamous murder castle, he also had a one-story factory that he claimed to have for blowing glass and glass bending and things like that. I'm sure that there was probably more that went into that and other uses for that, but that's what they said that was used for. So there was no evidence to prove otherwise.
Okay.
What are your speculations? What do you think he might have used that for? Or do you think it was just,
My thoughts on Holmes is not so much that he meant to be a serial killer as much as he did what he needed to make money. My guess is he probably was hoping to use it as a means of, making money. Like maybe he was using it for glass blowing and he was trying to sell trinkets or like who knows? It's tough to say with someone like him because he's intelligent enough to hide what he's doing. It's so hard to say. So I don't know what else he'd be doing it with because I can't think like this guy. You know
okay,
what I mean?
fair enough. There's going to be a quite a long list here. We got the victims list here. You ready to dive into this?
Okay, go ahead.
So we're going to start with Holmes' mistress. She was 31-year-old Julia Smythe. She was the wife of Nicholas Ned Connor. They'd moved into the hotel, and Julia had worked at the jewelry counter. And they struck up, conversations and friendship, and eventually ended up having an affair.
Okay.
And unfortunately, Ned did find out about this affair, and he ended up leaving, and he left Julia with their 5-year-old daughter. But Julia wasn't ready to give up the affair. She ended up continuing the relationship with Holmes, which ended up being a costly mistake because Julia and her daughter, Pearl, both disappeared on Christmas Eve in 1891.
Hmm.
Acquaintances claim that Julia had unexpectedly left to visit her dying sister, but the story was then later changed that she was getting away from her former husband. Although it was reported, I believe, that Ned did have a little bit of a temper. So Holmes later claimed that Julia had died during an abortion. So he's got a vastly, vastly different story here.
Yeah, it
He
sounds it.
he also had claimed to have poisoned Pearl, and I mean, I think that that was just cold.
I mean, I guess if you're gonna kill a baby, that'd probably be the easiest way to do it, or a young kid. Like,
Yeah,
I think it would be easier to make them drink something than to actually like murder them.
yeah, that's true. I mean, because then they don't think otherwise; they just think it's a drink, and then
Yeah, and you're
it's
and
all
you're
over.
not actually having to look at this infant while you're killing it.
True. Yep.
That's my guess, but
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you. A partial skeleton of a child around Pearl's age was found when they ended up excavating Holmes' cellar, when they ended up doing an investigation into him. So more than likely that was her skeleton, unfortunately.
yeah,
But
most likely. And back
yeah,
then, there's no way to identify it.
no, no. I mean, I had to remind myself that I was like, wait, different time, because I was like, okay, as soon as they found it, they'd be able to run tests, and nope, that's way in the future.
Yeah, way in the future, like 100 years in the future.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that's all I have on those victims. Next victim is Minnie Williams. She was a 24-year-old one-time actress. She was found in early 1893. Holmes claimed to have met her in an employment office, even though it was later reported that they had met earlier in Boston. But when he had met her, allegedly in Boston, he was using the alias Harry Gordon. Holmes had offered her a job as the personal stenographer for him.
I own a
Yeah,
hotel. I need someone to write down things I say.
I didn't make sense to me. I was wondering why he would need that, but I guess he just wanted it.
Well, he wanted something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, apparently he got what he wanted because he convinced Minnie to transfer her property, which she had in Fort Worth, Texas, to a man named Alexander Bond. Want to take a guess at who Alexander Bond was?
Holmes?
You know it.
Of course. Of course.
Yep. So he swindled his way into getting her property. The following month, when Holmes and Minnie were presenting themselves as husband and wife, they ended up renting an apartment in Chicago's Lincoln Park.
Good band. Cut my wife into pieces. Sorry.
Yes. Minnie's younger sister, Nanny, came to visit on July 15th, 1893, and she had written her aunt that brother Harry, she was going to accompany him to Europe.
Okay. Which is obvious bullshit.
Right, exactly. I had thought to myself that probably might not have been her, and it might have been Holmes writing this to the aunt, but nothing had been substantiated. But anyway, in the letter, she had signed off with a message saying, Brother Harry says that you need not trouble any more about me financially or otherwise. He and sister will see to me. I hope our hard days are over.
Hmm.
Which I thought was very cryptic. But once again, it's the time period, and that may have been something normal to write.
Sure. It doesn't sound normal to me. I'd have been on the phone with police, but that's,
Yeah, no, me as well. But that's why I had to take a step back, and I was like, okay, everything in my bones tell me that that's just not right. But it's the 1800s, who knows? Unfortunately, Minnie or Nanny were never seen alive again, and Holmes would use Minnie's name in future scams.
I mean, that tracks with him. Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly. I mean, I just had kind of had to laugh it off, and I was like, "You piece of shit!" Like, I wouldn't expect anything, less of you, but come on now.
No, we can expect less of him.
Like, all right, you can, yes. All
Yeah,
right.
he's a douchebag.
Our next victim is Emmeline Sigrenda. I know I butchered that bad, but
Yeah, we apologize to the
I, I
descendants
I
of.
apologize, and
Hey,
I
you know
can only
what?
sound things out as
I'm
much as I can.
I'm sure as good as I made the Korean and Japanese names sound when I reported them, I'm guarantee you people over in those countries are like, "Oh, you son of a bitch."
So she was 23 years old. She began working at Holmes Hotel in 1892, and she worked for him for 6 months. He hired her as a secretary due to her connection with a doctor who peddled a quote unquote vaccine that cured alcoholism.
Wow. Where did
Yeah,
that ever go?
right. Now, apparently, nowhere good.
It's kind of like when they invented solar powered cars in the 70s and the car companies bought all the patents so that no one could make them.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what that sounds like. Someone bought up all the patents on this let's cure alcoholism. Maybe Budweiser bought it out. Anyway, sorry.
So those who saw Emmeline before she disappeared saw that she had lost interest in Holmes. She wanted nothing to do with him, which means he could have killed her because he could tell that.
I don't know. I think his plan was probably to get rid of her, all was always to get rid of her. And this was just a loose end that he was probably maybe unaware of. He probably was so cocky that he thought she was completely under his spell.
He probably thought he was, the most beautiful, most charming, most intelligent thing, and there's no way that she could be done with me.
Right? I mean, it worked so far.
So Emmeline was last seen in December 1892. Her parents were informed that she had left to marry a man named Robert Phelps. Authorities theorized that she had gotten pregnant by Holmes and that she had died by possible abortion done by him.
Wow, he's such a great doctor, huh?
Yeah. All right, moving on to the next victim. John DeBrawl. He was his 68-year-old creditor of Holmes. So he died of apoplexy on April 17th, 1891, in the Murder Castle drugstore. John had collapsed and died shortly after it was seen that Holmes was giving him a black liquid. So he was pouring a black liquid down his throat and he collapsed, according to a witness. However, foul play was not suspected, and in 1895 it was determined that he had life insurance, and Holmes profited from his death. So I'm sure that Holmes slipped him something
I have no
that
doubt.
killed him. It is greed, and he is after everything he can get.
Exactly. At this point, you could tell me anything, and I'm like, yep, I believe it. He's a scumbag.
Next victim is Emily Van Tassel. She disappeared in 1891 after working at Holmes' drugstore. Holmes spoke of her in his confessions.
How does he keep getting? I mean, I know there was no like Indeed back then or whatever, but how does he keep getting new employees when his old employees just disappear?
People probably think they quit or left, or I don't know.
Yes, but like I need another secretary because my secretaries keep walking out. Like,
Right.
red flag. What?
Yeah, exactly. Like apparently people didn't follow red flags, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is Chicago. I guess it's the 1800s. We keep saying that, but was it really that different? I don't know.
So a lot of these victims were people that worked in the castle or in the drugstore, and he had talked about in his confession. There unfortunately wasn't a lot to a lot of these, just like the next victim, Dr. Rustler. He had an office in the quote unquote castle, and he went missing in 1891, and Holmes had mentioned him in his confession. There's a good handful of these that, they had some kind of connection with the drugstore or the castle, and
Right.
then he just talked about him in the confession. Kitty Kelly, she was a stenographer for Holmes, and she went missing in 1892. Once again, I don't know why you would need a stenographer, but apparently a second one was needed. John Davis, he was from Greensville, Pennsylvania, and he went to the World's Fair in 1893 and just vanished. So,
Okay.
that was Holmes' target demographic at that moment.
Oh yeah,
He
drifters during
wanted
a
as
big
many.
event.
Harry Walker, he was from Greenburgh, Indiana. He went missing in November 1893 and was alleged to have insured his life to Holmes for $20,000 and wrote to friends that he was working for Holmes in Chicago.
And yet that's not a red flag.
It's seriously like, what?
Like if you took out a life insurance policy on me and we've known each other for years, that's still suspicious.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
saying.
Milford Cole was from Baltimore, Maryland, and disappeared after receiving a telegram from Holmes to come to Chicago in July of 1894.
Wow.
So I don't know what the telegram said or if he promised something or what, but he somehow convinced them to show up and then they went disappeared.
Wow.
So while working in the chemical bank building on Dearborn Street, Holmes met a guy, Benjamin Relon Peitzel. He was a carpenter with a criminal past. So him and Peitzel definitely hit it off. He kind of became Holmes' right-hand man for criminal schemes and putting things together.
You always need that right hand man for criminal schemes.
Yeah. With insurance companies pressing to prosecute him, Holmes left Chicago in July 1894. So
Okay.
once again, he's on the run. He reappeared in Fort Worth, Texas, and ended up claiming the property that he had inherited from the
Right.
two victims.
Right. His secretaries.
Yeah, the Williams sisters. Once again, period time, but you would think somebody would look into something.
I mean, I
So,
guess if you like back then, I suppose if you show up on the property and you have all the legal documents, there's not a lot anyone can do.
yeah, that's true.
Which goes back to something we were talking about in a previous episode where Joyous looked up what felonies were, and she was like
Oh, yeah.
forgery is a felony. Yeah, this is why forgery is a felony.
Yep.
Because if you showed up with fake documents to take someone's house, that's a felony. And so yeah, that's off the point though. Sorry.
No, no, it all ties together in some weird way. So on that property, he once again tried to build an incomplete building and once again tried to not pay the contractors and the suppliers. So he's just continuing with his ways in different states and trying to get away with the same stuff.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
I don't know. You'd think you would maybe learn or try to upgrade or figure out something better. I don't know.
No, but most of what he's done, he's gotten away with. This isn't like that Stephen Roy Carr guy who always got arrested. This
True.
he's getting away with most of it, and then when they're closing in, he takes off again. So I'm not surprised he's not changing his ways. You keep doing what works for you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I can agree with that.
I always wondered why men yell out of cars at women walking down the street. And my
Okay.
guess is at some point that worked for them. Maybe as a teenager, they were cool and they yelled out to a girl who also knew them from school or something, and they turned and started talking to him. My guess is it has to be something like that, which is this. I mean, I'm it's a little off topic, but I'm applying it back to what Holmes is doing. You do what works until it doesn't. That's
All
my
right.
take.
Apparently, it finally catches up to him because in July of 1894, Holmes was arrested briefly for the first time on the charge of selling mortgaged goods in St. Louis.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing anything he can to get a dollar. He was promptly bailed out, but while he was in jail, he struck up a conversation with an outlaw named Marion Hedgepeth, who was serving a 25 years sentence. Holmes had conducted a plan to swindle another insurance company out of $10,000 by taking out a life insurance policy on himself and faking his death.
That's ridiculous.
Holmes had promised Marion $500 of that money if he could put him in touch with a lawyer who was shady and would get behind his scheme and could be trusted and not turn him in. So Holmes was pointed in the direction of Jeppeth Howe, who loved the scheme and wanted to be a part of it. So he
Oh,
found his sketchy attorney. And
okay.
the attorney was like, "Yep, I'm in. Let's do it."
He found his Saul Goodman.
Yeah, yeah, apparently. Unfortunately, Holmes' plan failed when the insurance company became suspicious and refused to pay.
Finally.
Yeah, I know. Somebody finally catches on. Rather than fight the claim, which I thought he was going to do, Holmes created a similar plan with his go-to man, Peitzel. Peitzel was going to fake his death, and his wife was going to collect the $10,000, which he would split between Holmes and the shady lawyer.
Okay. I can see where this is
So,
going.
so, so now we're getting other family members involved here, though. We got the wife picking up the money,
You're going to wonder how much she really understood and how much she really just needed the money.
or, it's a different time, and whatever the man says, that's what you do.
Maybe. But it's also, people are more religious back then, I think. So they'd be less likely, maybe.
So Holmes and Peitzel created this elaborate plan, but unbeknownst to Peitzel, Holmes had a plan of his own, and instead he ended up killing Peitzel on September 4th of 1894 by knocking him out with chloroform and setting his body on fire with benzene.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
fun.
Oh yeah. So now he's actually gone out and done it. He's gone out and killed. In his confession, Holmes implied Peitzel was still alive after he used the chloroform on him, but before he set him on fire, which was intriguing to me because I don't think chloroform kills, does it?
It can, yes.
Oh, it can.
It's like any other chemical. Put it over your face and that's all you're breathing in. It can kill you. Just like anything else, really.
Okay. I didn't think it was that strong. I thought that, it was just quick sedative kind of thing.
No, that's Hollywood bullshit. Like it's
Okay. I don't
yeah.
know enough about it.
No, I mean it will knock you out, but it's more likely either gonna not or it's gonna really fuck you up.
Okay.
Not that I've used it. No, I'm kidding. I've done for this podcast, I've done my research on certain things.
Yes. Forensic evidence presented at Holmes' later trial showed chloroform had been used after Peitzel's death, and the insurance company was unaware of this.
Okay.
Apparently, something was changed or hidden or something where that fact was just not known to them.
Hmm. Okay.
So it was presumably to stage suicide should Holmes be charged with murder.
Okay. All right. I guess. Weird.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess he's trying to think up all the different angles and how to cover his ass in every possible way.
No, I mean, I guess in a way it makes sense. It's just weird, you know?
Definitely. Oh, definitely. Now, here's where it gets really messed up. Holmes was able to collect the insurance payout based on the genuine corpse of Peitzel. He was able to just get
Right.
the
That makes
insurance,
sense. Yeah.
which I was like, okay. Once again, nobody's looking into anything. Why?
It's probably a different insurance company. But you would think that these insurance companies would be paying more attention. But I mean, if you have someone's legit body and you can kind of prove it, and again, it's harder to prove anything back then, but it still makes sense that they're paying it out. He actually is the guy.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. So Holmes went on to manipulate Peitzel's wife into allowing three of their five children into his custody, which I
Why the
thought was,
hell would you want to
yeah,
do that?
I not a clue. I thought it
Uh,
was scary and sickening and just manipulative. And
yeah, unless he's planning on doing the same scam with the kids, that doesn't make any sense.
so the three kids were a 13-year-old named Alice, a 9-year-old named Nellie, and a 7-year-old named Howard.
A lot of Harrys and Howards in this.
Yeah, the three children and Holmes traveled northern US and Canada. So at the same time of him going along with the kids, Holmes followed a parallel route to the wife, all the while, lying to her about her husband and where the kids actually were and what was going on and all these kinds of things. He was giving her half truths and
You
just kind
think,
of leading her on.
yeah, you think she'd be getting wise to this scam by now. She knows they were going in on a scam. Does she know her husband's actually dead?
No, so I don't think she knows, and I think that's why Holmes is kind of lying to her and telling her
Yeah,
fake
yeah.
info to be like, oh, don't worry, he's off doing something else. He'll be back soon.
Yeah, but this is my point. She knows she's part of a scam, and now someone's acting super shady. You'd think she'd be more aware and ready for it, but
No, I know exactly. I completely
clearly
agree.
not. Little late to do anything about it now, eh?
Yeah, exactly. So Holmes later confessed to murdering both Alice and Nellie on October 25th, 1894, by forcing them into a large trunk and locking them inside.
That's a rough way to go.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. And I imagine how scary that is as a kid. You're just told to get in there and you don't know what's going on. And so Holmes drilled a hole in the top of the trunk, excuse me, and put a hose through the hole and tied the other end to a gas line.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
he was
He
pumping
created a gas
gas.
chamber.
Yep.
But it goes back to when he killed that infant and you were like, why would you bother poisoning it? Because he can't do it himself.
Right. Yeah, okay. Yep, I can see the cowardice pattern here.
Yeah. He's not really a killer so much as he is a fraudster and an insurance person. You know what I mean? So, yeah,
Yeah, most definitely.
he's definitely the embodiment of greed.
Yeah, no kidding. So Holmes buried their nude bodies in the cellar of his rental home in Toronto.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Frank Gear, a Philadelphia police investigator assigned to investigate the Holmes case, found the missing children and the decomposed bodies, and he was quoted as saying, "The deeper they dug, the more horrible the stench became. And by the time they reached 3 feet, they discovered what appeared to be the bone of a forearm of a human." Gear went to Indianapolis to where Holmes had rented a cottage. He had gone there and it looked into cases and bodies and what he might have been keeping there.
Right.
So Holmes' murder spree finally ended when he was arrested in Boston on November 17th, 1894, after being traced there from Philadelphia. He was held on an outstanding warrant for, get this, horse theft.
It is the 1800s.
I was like, out of all things that's going to take this guy down, horse theft is going to be.
You know what, though? Capone was taken down by taxes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's always the small, stupid stuff, right?
I mean, yeah, that it sucks for him, but I mean, it's kind of funny, He's especially because you've chosen him as greed, so he stole horses, and that's what got him. That's fantastic.
Authorities had become more suspicious at this point, and Holmes had been ready to flee the country and disappear with his unsuspecting wife. So they were kind of catching on at this point. In July 1895, following the discovery of Alice and Nellie's bodies, Chicago police and reporters began investigating Holmes, his drugstore, and his murder castle in Inglewood. He was also investigated in October 1895 for the murder of his right-hand man, Benjamin Peitzel, and was found guilty, and he was sentenced to death.
Good. He deserves death.
Following his conviction, Holmes confessed to 27 murders in Chicago, Indianapolis, Toronto, and six other attempted murders. Now, keeping with the greed theme, Holmes was paid $7,500 by the Hart newspaper in exchange for his confession.
Who's he giving it to? What's he doing with that money?
He doesn't care. He just wants
Yeah.
money. He doesn't care what he says. He's getting money out of it.
He's probably buried with it. And then it would be appropriate if someone dug him up and took it.
Oh my God, that'd be great. But you're starting to sound like me, and you're starting to kind of foreshadow what's coming. So on May 7th, 1896, Holmes was hanged in prison for the murder of Peitzel. Until the moment of his death, he remained calm. He wasn't anxious. He wasn't scared or anything like that, which I don't understand how you could be like that. I'd be freaking out.
No, I think once you make peace with it, I think you'd be fine. A lot
Well,
of people,
I hope to never be in that situation.
well, yeah, agreed. But a lot of people historically that were publicly executed, I mean, I would say a majority of them handle it pretty well.
So now here's where I was saying you were kind of foreshadowing to. So despite him being calm and despite him being collected, he asked that his coffin be contained in cement uh, and buried 10 feet deep because he was afraid people would rob his grave and steal his body for dissection.
That's so funny.
So he was afraid it was just going to happen to him.
Let's do it.
Now, this, I mean, he deserves it, but even still, this kind of make me cringe a little bit. Holmes did his neck when they went to go hang him. It didn't break.
Oh, so
So
he
he
suffered.
slowly strangled to death.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It took 15 minutes before he was pronounced dead.
I don't know
Go
if you
ahead.
know this, but around that time, or maybe before that, there were people. So basically, if you were convicted and found guilty and sentenced to death,
Hmm.
and your death was by hanging, there was a time period where you could hire a doctor, and after you're pronounced dead, this doctor could try to revive you.
What?
And there are cases where these people were successfully revived, and then there was nothing the authorities could do because they had already paid their price. They had already been killed.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and I very well maybe, but isn't that why they have multiple life sentences?
Maybe, but no, I think it's that's for more for like the record books.
Oh,
You know,
okay,
like you
I thought
killed,
like because like if somebody died of like a quote unquote heart attack in prison and they
revive
died
them.
and then they got revived, that's technically
No,
living a
I
life sentence, isn't it?
no, I think if you were like on an operating table and died and then you were immediately brought back, I don't think that would be it. But I do think it's true that if you were like lethally injected, died, they pronounced you dead, and then something miraculous happened and you were brought back. I don't like, and they may have changed the laws since all of this, but that's part of what led to we need, and plus the cruel and unusual punishment thing with how long it takes you to suffer. It was be kind of a combination of these two things that led to let's drop them fast and hard so their neck breaks.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I read a whole thing on the history of the death penalty. It was fucked up.
Wow. That's insane. So in 2017, amid allegations that Holmes had escaped execution, his body was exhumed.
Of course it was.
They wanted to do testing. They wanted to make sure it was him. Body was positively identified as being him through dental records.
Okay.
Now, here's something kind of cool. So his clothes were almost perfectly preserved, which I
Okay.
thought was interesting. And his mustache was found to be intact.
Yeah, but I'm gonna guess it's being so deep and encased in concrete that it did something like maybe protected him from some of the elements, like insects or something. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know, but I don't know. I found that interesting because, everybody else, everything would just be destroyed.
Maybe. Again, I don't know. I never looked at old corpses, but now I want to know if Freddie Mercury's mustache is still there.
Yes. Oh my God, that'd be incredible.
There are other famous mustaches we could be talking about, but I'm not going to take that route.
Oh God. So Holmes is considered mostly urban legend at this point, more than anything else. His murder castle gets more and more elaborate, and the things that are inside it become more and more crazy. People make up all kinds of stories. But he was a greedy man that killed for money and was considered to be one of the most diabolical minds of all time. In reality, he really wasn't.
No, he was just a greedy SOB.
And so that is the case on H. Holmes.
Awesome. That was a good job. All right. So, everybody, thanks for joining us for our fifth night of the seven deadly sins. We've only got two
Woo!
more to go.
Yeah.
Two more. So, tomorrow night, Joyous will be regaling us with the tale of, I believe she's doing Vanity.
Oh, that should be a good one.
Yeah. And then 2 days from now is Halloween, and I will be wrapping
Yeah.
this entire thing up with the seven deadly sins of lust. And let me tell you, this is a fucked up case.
Oh, I can't wait. Yes.
It is just fucking twisted. There's no other way to
Beautiful.
describe it. So thank you guys for joining us. You'll see us again you'll hear us again tomorrow night. So I am Janice Dead,
I'm Jameson dead.
and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Bye.